Hello. So this morning I was doing some Umamusume homework and I realized that I could share some of my methodology with you guys. So I decided that I wanted to make a new legacy tree for my aces in CM7 Scorpio Cup because they're all front runners and I don't have a queen in my legacy tree. So I don't really have any option of inheriting Duty of Dignity calls, which is a pretty nice velocity skill if you are a front runner in this upcoming CM. So I decided that I wanted to redo my legacy tree, and I thought that maybe I would kind of talk you guys through how I craft legacy trees for champion meetings. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my considerations for selecting grandparents. I'm going to talk about some White Spark inheritance rules. I will talk about how to select decks for your parent runs. And then I'm just going to give some general tips. And at the very end, I'll talk about Unity versus Ura. All right, so when I am making a parent, obviously I have to select a grandparent. And you have to use at least one grandparent from your own account. So this is kind of a flowchart on how to select that specific grandparent. I don't make purpose-built grandparents for every CM. I mostly just start with parents. The reason being is for grandparents, I really value 3 blue sparks really highly. And trying to intentionally build an UMA that will get a good 3 blue sparks is kind of very time consuming. And I don't really have that kind of time to devote to just grandparents. So I use grandparents on my account that I already had from perhaps it's a previous parent run or maybe a previous ace run that rolled really well. One of my best grandparents that I use constantly was just sort of like a random team trials run. So with this, I kind of cut down the time it takes for me to make a legacy. It does mean that my legacy is not quite as purpose-built for the CM, but honestly, I don't think that you need to invest quite that much effort into it to get good results. So I have to select a grandparent from my account. And this is the flowchart that I use to try to consider what grandparent to choose. And you want to look at this as a sliding scale of importance, but you also want to consider everything holistically. So it is more important to have like a 3-star blue than it would be to have like good race affinity. But you still want to look at race affinity, especially when you're comparing between 3-star blues. And I'll go through all of these. So the very most important thing is a crucial third inherit. This doesn't come up very often, but for example, in Taurus Cup, if you're running a gold ship, you wanted to have Red Shift from Barzensky, you wanted to have Shooting for Victory from Taiki Shuttle, and you wanted to have Let's Pump Some Iron from Meji Orion. So you can't inherit all of those automatically because you can only for sure inherit one thing from each parent. So you want to make sure that that grandparent, of course, is that crucial third inherit. This is one of those situations where if you don't inherit this third unique, then the run is not as good. So you want to make sure that you can have that grandparent on ideally both sides of your legacy tree. The second most important thing is going to be a 3-star blue. I think that I tend to value 3-star blues higher than a lot of other players when it comes to selecting grandparents. But for me, this is one of those considerations between consistency versus high rolling. So a 3-star blue is much, much, much more consistent because the only thing that you will for sure inherit from this grandparent is the stat from the 3-star blue. So if you're running a 1-star blue on this grandparent, then your stat is not going to be as high, and that's going to persist for every single run that you do with your ace. So I really like to make sure that my blue is 3-star. Another reason for this is also because it just feels really, really nice to roll a 9-star blue legacy. And that's the kind of parent, lineage that you can use many, many times because it's just extremely valuable. The next thing that I'm going to look at is a relevant pink. I probably wouldn't use a 3-star blue if it did not have a relevant pink. So these two really go hand in hand, and you want to try to consider them both together. So a relevant pink for a grandparent, it's a little bit less likely that you're going to be passing down pinks from your grandparents, but you still want to have pinks that are relevant for the track, just in case you do. The worst thing in the world is like accidentally passing down like long S when it's a mile track, right? Because one of your grandparents had long pink. So you want to make sure that your pink is ideally situated for distance, so you can pass down that distance S. And if not, then turf is kind of the next best option because nobody's really going to get upset about hitting turf S, right? Now, if you have an UMA that you need affinity for to increase aptitude to a certain rank, like for example, Fuji Kiseki has a C in front, and I want to run her as a front. That means that she's going to need at least 4 pink sparks to hit front A. And I'm going to want to put those 4 pink sparks on my grandparents because it's more likely that I'm going to inherit pinks from a parent. And I want to inherit distance S more than I care about inheriting front S, right? So ideally, if I'm thinking about making a front runner Fuji, I'm going to have both of my grandparents be front pink sparks. And then I'm going to wait until I can spark a distance spark on my parent. And then I'm going to use that legacy for Fuji so that I can be more flexible in selecting the legacies that I'm trying to borrow from my guest. Now, the next thing is just good affinity. You can use the affinity calculator on Game Tora, which will help you to calculate your base affinity from your grandparent to your ace. And that's going to help because obviously the more affinity you have, the more likely it is that you pass down those pink sparks or you pass down some white sparks. So good affinity obviously is just always going to be a consideration that you want to use. And then is when I start thinking about whites. So I do feel like a lot of people tend to overvalue whites, especially on grandparents. Your chances of passing down a white from a grandparent is actually pretty low. And I don't think that it should be like a huge major consideration over something more consistent like blues. It's always good to have, obviously, and it's really good if you can manage to spark those whites. But in my experience, it's never, you don't ever want to have to rely on these whites. One of the major reasons to have good white legacies is for crucial skills like groundwork or straightaway spurt. If your grandparent has legacies that have these whites, so your grandparent has them, your great-grandparent has them, and your other great-grandparent has them, then your chances of sparking that white on your parent are slightly higher. It's not a lot higher, it's slightly higher. So it's a really nice bonus if you can get that white on a grandparent so that you can have a slightly higher chance of sparking that crucial skill on your parent. And then the last thing that I want to take into consideration is going to be race affinity. There's a mechanic where if your legacy Umas are sharing races, they share race wins. So for example, if they both win the Autumn Tenno show, then your affinity for your eventual ace is going to be very slightly higher. So by combining a bunch of race wins onto all of these other attributes, you're able to increase your affinity, which increases your chances of passing down, these whites, these pinks, so on and so forth. It's not something that is, I consider like a huge make or break, but it's definitely something that I like to look at when I'm trying to select between parents, especially when I'm looking at my guest borrow parents, like parents that I can really be choosy and selective about. So this is my grandparent flowchart, and I use this in pretty much all of my decision making when it comes to making parents. So hopefully it was helpful, and now we can move on to the next section. Okay, so let's put this all into practice. So I need to select a grandparent for the Saiyan Sky, and I have my entire account full of Umas to choose from. So the first thing is that you always want to have view sparks on. It's such a great QL feature that was introduced in the November patch, and it makes this selection so much faster. Then you can go ahead and look at so you can start filtering down. Now, like I said, I really value 3-star blues, so I'm just going to go ahead and look at my 3-star blues only for now. If I run out of options, I can switch down to 2 and above, so on and so forth, but this is what I want to look at. And then relevant pinks, like I said, I want to look at medium, I want to look at turf. Maybe I'll look at front because I'm making the Saiyan Sky for front runners. And then everything else is not super into consideration. If you use your favorite icons very thoroughly, then you can use this. I actually do use them pretty thoroughly, but I want to use this here for the tutorial. So here we have all of my 3-star blues with a relevant 2-star pink. And there's a couple things that we're seeing. So I sort by affinity bonus, which makes things a lot easier for cross-referencing affinities. And I do know that Top Gun has a pretty high affinity with Saiyan Sky. So this is a decent option. If I look at this and I look at her whites, they're not great. They're not super related to the current CM or the track that I'm doing. And if I look down here, the nice thing about selecting a grandparent is that none of these really matter. The only time that you're pink for a great grandparent is really going to matter is if you're accidentally increasing your parent's aptitude of something that you don't want to spark in to A. Because what happens is if I have I think I have one over here. If I have for example, this Uma has a pace grandparent. And if right here, and so if I increase Say and Sky's pace aptitude to A, that puts an additional aptitude in the pool that she can do a pink spark from, which ultimately means that it's going to take more runs for me to get a medium pink Say and Sky. And that's what I really want to do. So I want to avoid increasing her aptitude, or her other aptitudes to A as much as possible. So I'm looking for my 3-star blue with a relevant pink. I don't really have any mediums. I have this one, and I don't think that Gold Chip is going to be a great grandparent for like Silent Suzuka. And it's only a 1-star medium anyway. So maybe I'm leaning more towards Turf. I obviously don't want to use Suzuka to be her own grandparent. I do like this Tachyon, who is my groundwork and Ur finale, 3 stamina, 2 turf, so she's pretty nice. So I'd probably either use my Tachyon or my Top Gun. This Taiki is really, really nice. She's 3 and 3, good Unity Cup. She's pretty good, except she only ran mile and sprint races, which means that she's not going to have very high race affinity with pretty much anyone else in the Legacy. She has high affinity with Marazensky and Fujikiseki, but in terms of like race affinity, it's going to be a little bit tricky. So I'm kind of thinking about that. I'm kind of thinking, do I want stamina sparks? Do I want power sparks? Because I have all these 3-star blues, I can afford to be a little bit selective. But let's just go ahead and use this Top Gun. Okay, so we finally have our grandparent from our own account. Now we want to find a Borrow Grandparent. A Borrow Grandparent is probably going to be a little bit higher quality than whatever secondary grandparent you might have on your account. So it's generally nice to use grandparents for this. And in order to find a grandparent, I like to use one of the many database sites that's available to the Umamusume fandom. The one that I'm going to go ahead and show today is going to be Chronogenesis, because I started using that one recently and I do really like it. So Chronogenesis gives you a lot of selection options here. Because I am using Say and Sky, and I know that for Fuji and Marazensky, I am going to want to use Taiki Shuttle as a parent, but it might also be nice if I could inherit Duty of Dignity calls, right? So specifically, maybe I want to look for a McQueen grandparent. And when I'm looking for a grandparent, I don't actually care what their parent sparks are. All I care about is what's on this Uma. So you can go ahead and actually search just by legacy, which gives you more results that you might not have gotten otherwise. And so you're able to see with a little bit more granularity to get these specific legacies. So if I look for McQueen, and I look for McQueen specifically with 3-star stamina and 3-star medium, we're going to go ahead and search for that. Great. So this is 136 results. So it's definitely a lot of options that I can use. Sometimes I just spend a lot of time just going through these because I don't know, for me it's kind of fun just to see what all is available. But with 136 results, you can also filter it down more granularly. Like, for example, maybe I want to try to prioritize inheriting Duty of Dignity calls, which means that I would like it to have more stars than just one. So maybe I'll say, what's a minimum of the 2-star Duty of Dignity calls that I can inherit? And when this loads, now it's 72, and I'm starting to see some decent options here. Another thing I like to do is sort it by common skill. That just means that there's going to be more skills here, which for grandparents can mean that there's more skills on the grandparent. Like this one's pretty nice. I might consider using this one. And then I would just look through them all. So, you just copy and paste this friend code into your Uma and use that as your legacy. All right, so now that we finally have our parent with our grandparent selected, I am going to talk a little bit about making a parent deck. Now, I see a lot of people asking questions about parent decks, and I know that it can be really overwhelming. So with this, I'm hoping to help show you how to be a little bit more self-reliant when it comes to making your own decisions on what decks you want to use for your parents. So first things first, I auto-include Kita-san block in every parent deck. And the reason for this is even if she didn't have great events, good skills, mood, energy, all that, she single-handedly will carry you through your career. So no matter what these other cards are, your Uma will be able to win their career just by leaning on Kita-san block. So I always include her. It definitely doesn't hurt that she does have good skills. Like she does have front straights, dodging danger for fronts, corner recovery and corner adept are just universal. Focus is also good for fronts. So she's just a good auto include. Now, what do I use after this? So my main resource that I use for selecting the rest of my parent deck is going to be the skill list on GameTora. So this list will tell you like what cards have what skills, and you can cross-reference that with your own account to see what cards you can run on your account. So for example, I know that because I'm running Saiyan Sky and I want her to be a front parent, that I need to have groundwork on her. So I'm going to go look for groundwork, and I'm going to see which cards have groundwork. So all of these cards will give me a hint for groundwork. And this card has it in an event. So that's interesting to me because I know that if it's in a chain event, if it's in their main events, then I have a much higher chance of getting it in every single career. So I'm going to look at her card support page. I'm going to scroll all the way down, look at her other skills. I know that Wet Conditions is good for this track. I know that Frontrunner Savvy is good for a frontrunner. Corner Recovery is always going to be nice. And she does have groundwork, focus, prudent positioning, final push from her events. These are all decent skills. So I'm thinking that Falcon's going to be a pretty good card. Then you can look at her chain training events, and these are the ones that you're going to be able to rely on getting very consistently in all of your runs. So I can see here that she does give groundwork in her first chain, which means that it's very, very reliable that if I use this Falcon card, I'm going to get groundwork. So that's really cool. I am going to go ahead and look at my account then. I don't have Falcon power. So that's has to be my borrow slot because I am thinking in my mind that groundwork is the most important thing that I'm going to want on the Saiyan Sky. So I filter by power. I have already followed a MLB Falcon power friend, so that's just what I'm going to use. Now for the rest of these 4 slots, I know that I'm going to go ahead and go back to that skills page. So I know that I'm running Saiyan Sky to be a frontrunner parent, and I know that I'm running her for a medium track. So the next thing I'm going to look at is maybe front corners and front straights and see who has those. So front corners, interesting. Okay. And then front straights. All right. So I can see there's some overlap here. And then I would just look through these cards and see which one of them I feel like would be good to include in the deck. So I am going to include this card here. I've already done all that research. I've already looked at all those cards. And I know that this Silent Suzuka Stamina card has so many great skills that I want to use in this medium CM. She also gives concentration gold skill, which is pretty nice. And I'll talk a little bit more about gold skills on parent runs in a second. But these are all really, really attractive. So I'm going to go ahead and use that card because everybody got it for free with the 2nd anniversary event. And then I will go back and look for other cards. Another card that I want to use is, so I'm thinking about skills like front straights, front corners, medium straights, medium corners. Those are all gimmies. I'm thinking about skills, cards that might have relevant greens like Wet Conditions or rainy days or standard distance, cards like that. Those are all things that I can search in here. And if you're not sure about what conditions your champion meeting is going to have, this also has a great resource here where you can just scroll down and see all of the the stats that belong to those champion meetings. So Scorpio Cup is going to be Tokyo, so I'm looking for Tokyo. It's going to be standard distance, so looking for standard distance. I'm looking for left-handed. I'm looking for Wet Conditions. I'm looking for fall runner. I'm looking for rainy days. All good things to kind of keep in the back of your mind and consider when you're trying to make those decisions on what cards you want to include. So another thing to consider is what skills do you want to have on every single Uma that your parent will be siring. you want to have taking the lead on every single parent, or on every single ace that I'm making from Saiyan Sky. So what I want to do then is I want to inherit early lead. I want Saiyan Sky to have early lead as a white spark. So I'm going to use this bourbon card, even though I use this bourbon card on ace runs, because if Saiyan Sky gets to spark early lead, then and she passes down that early lead spark and inspiration, then that skill is cheaper to buy on your ace, which means that they can spend SP more efficiently. So it's always really a good idea to try and spark white skills, even for cards that you're going to run anyway in your ace runs, especially if those white skills are very, very crucial must-have skills. So I use this bourbon. She also gives straightaways and corners, which is great. Early lead is that skill I was talking about. And then here we're going to go ahead and try to learn taking the lead on this Saiyan Sky if possible. And the reason for this is when you learn a yellow skill, the chances of it sparking onto that parent are much higher. I'm going to go ahead and link the inheritance, like the big inheritance doc in my comments, but because early lead is so crucial, we want to learn taking the lead on Saiyan Sky. So you just keep going through the skill list. You keep going through the greens you want, the whites you want, the whites you want that would be crucial that you might get golds for, so on and so forth. So I've already done a lot of this research for this CM, but I like the idea of inheriting wet conditions because power is a little bit harder for me to inherit with my ace decks because I'm running wit heavy decks. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and look at these. I have a good Windy. I know that Windy gives a lot of SP during her chain events. So I can use Windy. The thing about this process is that it is slow, especially the first few times. Like, it is annoying. Like, you're literally doing homework for Umamusume. But the more you do it, the more you learn what cards have what skills, what cards are better for which, what cards work and what cards don't for distances, for runner styles, for anything like that. The faster this process is going to be, and then the more you can use your own reasoning to set up decks like this and be more self-reliant, so you're not waiting for a content creator to make a guide for this specific CM. So I really want to teach people how to make these decisions and how to run with decks like this for their parent runs. So Unity versus Ura for parent runs is the last thing that I'm going to talk about. And honestly, I see this discussion a lot, and I don't really understand why it's such a huge debate, because Unity is just so much better. You get more SP to get skills with. You get more stats to hit 600 in every stat for a parent run to get better blue sparks. You get more skills from explosions, more variety of skills so that you're relying less on your deck. Ura is, I guess, shorter, so if you're trying to bang out runs, maybe a run taking 4 minutes less is important. The hint UI is a little bit better, but you just click the facilities in Unity to check which cards have hints on them. The real difference is Unity Spark versus Ura Spark. I still think Unity Spark is better. Ura Spark is speed and stamina. Unity Spark is power and wit. So speed and stamina is really nice, especially on paper, but if I'm making an ace, I'm already including the minimum viable speed and stamina for that ace to function well, because I can't rely on an Ura Spark to supplement my speed and stamina. However, Unity Spark being power and wit they're more luxury stats. So the more you have of them, the better, but you don't have to have a certain amount, or else the run is glue, right? You are able to take those luxury stats, and if it pops in your inspiration, you're really happy about it, but if it doesn't pop, it's not that big of a deal. Whereas if you're really relying on Ura Spark for your stamina requirements, you're going to have a bad time. The final reason that people are talking about maybe being scared of using Unity for parent runs is that there's this weird perception that you can't do a lot of races in Unity, and you absolutely can. There's nothing that physically stops you from clicking races in the game. Obviously building Unity explosions is nice, but it's not a requirement, especially for parent runs. And like you don't even really want to beat Zenith in the end. Like if you lose against Zenith, it's totally fine, because if you win against them, then you'll have like Bitter Glass and Kokon in your finals, which are harder to beat anyway. So like just take the second option every time and like throw against Zenith, and it's totally fine to run like 25, 30 races in Unity. The game is not going to punish you for it on a parent run. All right, now this is my end result. So I was able to buy a lot of skills, and this was what it sparked into. 1-star speed, 2-star front, obviously not great, but just to give you an idea of what an end result from parents like this might look like. If you're just looking at the grandparents on this legacy tree, this looks pretty nice. If this Saiyan had sparked, like 3 speed or 3 stamina or something like that, this entire legacy tree would like be a really, really solid legacy. So that's just kind of what one of the end results, just one end result might look like. I haven't done this enough times to get like actually a decent parent yet, but I haven't been running that often, or that many runs. So that's it for the video. Thank you guys again for watching, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully this helped you to figure out some parent builds of your own. Bye-bye.